Today, I want to revisit that Karl-Anthony Towns and Julius Randle trade. And clearly that trade is a win-win. But is that trade really the biggest win-win trade in NBA history? We're going to talk about it. But before we get started, I want to tell you guys to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share, and to continue to support my channel.
Biggest the Super Bowl.
The New York Knicks and the Minnesota Timberwolves are both heading to the conference finals. The Minnesota Timberwolves, as of this recording, will be playing the winner of the Oklahoma City Thunder Denver Nuggets series, which is going to be a Game 7. And the New York Knicks will be playing the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals. And, you know, the New York Knicks ended up defeating the Boston Celtics in Game 6, beat them down. I mean, it was a butt kicking, you know, in that game. And the New York Knicks took care of business. They beat the Boston Celtics, and obviously, you know, the Boston Celtics ended up, you know, it's been a sad state of affairs with their team lately, you know, with Jason Tatum tearing his Achilles. He's likely going to be out for the entirety of next season. You know, Kristaps Porzingis is dealing with some health problems as well. You know, Jaylen Brown had a little bit of a knee issue heading into the playoffs. So Boston, you know, they limped out of the playoffs. You know, they were injured, they're banged up, and sadly for them, you know, they're going to have some decisions to make this offseason as far as who to keep. You know, how do we retool the team and all of that stuff. But man, I want to talk about the Knicks, man, and specifically this trade. You know, I want to revisit the Karl-Anthony Towns Julius Randle trade, because when that trade happened, I was of the opinion that the New York Knicks got dramatically better and that they clearly won that trade. And they, you know, look, they played up to my expectations. You know, the New York Knicks are in the conference finals, and Karl-Anthony Towns has had probably the best season of his career. And he's been a huge difference maker for these New York Knicks, along with Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart and OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson and Miles McBride. Like, you know, you gotta take your cap out to the New York Knicks and Tom Thibodeau. But I also gotta say this too. I think that trade is also a win for the Minnesota Timberwolves as well. And I admit, I did not feel this way when that trade first happened back in, late September, early October. Like, I did not feel this way about the Minnesota Timberwolves when they made that deal. But I gotta say, man, shout out to Julius Randle and for how he's been able to adjust his game and for him to make an impact on that team. And quite frankly, I don't know if people have been paying attention, but Julius Randle in the playoffs has been outstanding. He's been outstanding in these NBA playoffs. And I gotta send Julius Randle his flowers. He's been awesome. You talk about a dude that has reversed the perception that people have had of him heading into this playoffs, because you look at what he did the first couple of years in his playoffs. He was not very good. You know, he was pretty terrible his first, you know, couple of stints in the playoffs with the New York Knicks. But if you look at what he's done for the Minnesota Timberwolves in the playoffs, the guy's averaging 24 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. He's shooting over 51% from the field, and he's shooting over nearly 35% from 3. And so this guy has been just awesome in these playoffs, and he's done a hell of a job of just taking some pressure off Anthony Edwards, and he's made a real difference on the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like, he's provided exactly what Minnesota was hoping that they would get out of him. You know, he's not the floor spacer that Karl-Anthony Towns was when he was in Minnesota, but he's given Minnesota a secondary ball handler. He's given Minnesota a guy that can, you know, when Anthony Edwards gets double teamed and trapped, he's a guy that can make a play with the ball in his hands. He can dribble the ball. He can pass. he can finish in transition. He can post you up, get to the cup. He's a versatile offensive player. And along with the fact that he can make some threes, even though he's not as good as a shooter as Karl-Anthony Towns was, but he's a versatile player who can make plays with the ball in his hands, and he's made life easier for Anthony Edwards, and he's made life easier for Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels and Mike Conley and Dante DiVincenzo, who Minnesota also got in that trade with Julius Randle. And so, look, man, Minnesota, they've done their thing, man. Like they're in the conference finals, and quite frankly, like I gotta say, like the Minnesota Timberwolves have a great chance to win the championship. They can win it all. Like it wouldn't surprise me if they beat OKC or Denver or whoever comes out of that, last game 7. Like the NBA finals is wide. The NBA championship path is wide open for all of these teams, including, again, the team that traded Julius Randle and got Karl-Anthony Towns, the New York Knicks. The pathway is open for all of these teams. And as I revisit this trade with the Knicks and the Minnesota Timberwolves, like, again, it's clear as day right at this very moment that both teams won that Karl-Anthony Towns Julius Randle trade, or Karl-Anthony Towns Julius Randle Dante DiVincenzo trade. Like both teams won. Both teams, both the Minnesota Timberwolves and both the New York Knicks, should be very happy with their outcome with that Karl-Anthony Towns Julius Randle trade, because it was an awesome trade for both teams. And for the New York Knicks, I mean, you talk about just an absolute masterclass of team building and what the Knicks have done over the past like 5 or so years since I can't believe I'm forgetting the general manager's name. Excuse me for that. I apologize. But Leon Rose. There you go. Leon Rose. Like you got to give Leon Rose some credit, man, for what he's done in building this New York Knicks team, because he's killed it on the margins. And just getting Jalen Brunson in free agency from the Dallas Mavericks was just a heist. Just a flat out heist. I mean, I can't say enough about Jalen Brunson. I mean, the guy is an absolute postseason killer. He's just a baller, man. Like the third straight postseason in a row, he's dominated the playoffs. He's dominated the postseason. The guy right now is averaging 28 points a game, 7 assists, and he's shooting over 44% from the field and 36% from 3 in this year's playoffs. I mean, the guy is an absolute gamer. And as a little guard, I mean, it's hard. It's crazy for me to confess this, but is there a better little guard in the league than Jalen Brunson? I don't know. I don't think so. And look, and that's all due respect to like this current version of Steph Curry, even Trae Young, my guy. I love my Hawks, but like you can go on and on and on. Like when you talk about little guards right now, I don't think there's a better guard right now, little guard, than Jalen Brunson. He's been incredible. He's been incredible. And the Knicks have done an awesome job of building around this kid. When you talk about Mikal Bridges, defender, 3-and-D wing. OG Anunoby, defender, 3-and-D wing who can hit threes and attack closeouts. You got Josh Hart, who they also acquired in a trade a few years back, right? They got Mitchell Robinson, who they just got back from injury a few weeks ago, and he's hit his stride. I think he's made a real difference for the New York Knicks. And obviously, again, Karl-Anthony Towns, the guy that they got in the trade from those Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, it's just an awesome display of team building. And by the way, keep this in mind when you look at the New York Knicks. When you look at their top 5 6 guys. Only one guy they actually drafted. Mitchell Robinson. They drafted him in 2018 in the 2nd round. You look at the guys that they got. Like I said, they got Jalen Brunson in free agency. They got Josh Hart in a trade. They got Mikal Bridges in a trade. They got OG Anunoby in a trade. And they got Karl-Anthony Towns in a trade. I mean, it's incredible. And the guys that they ended up trading, I think they traded a bunch of picks to get Mikal Bridges. They traded Cam Reddish, to get Josh Hart. They traded Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, 2 guys that they drafted to get OG Anunoby. And again, they traded Julius Randle, who they got in free agency. And they traded Dante DiVincenzo. I think they got him in free agency. So it's been incredible, man. Like, it's been a unique display of team building from these New York Knicks. And again, Leon Rose deserves all the credit in the world. And going back to this trade that Minnesota made, I mean, with both these teams, the New York Knicks and the Minnesota Timberwolves. And for Minnesota, like I said, man, Tim Connelly deserves his love as well. For how he's constructed the Minnesota Timberwolves. He drafted Anthony Edwards. Obviously, he's the number 1 pick in the draft, but I mean, hey, you got to get that right, because that 2020 draft, it wasn't a certainty that Anthony Edwards was the number 1 player in that draft. Some people thought it was LaMelo Ball. Other people thought it was James Wiseman. And credit for Minnesota for taking the right approach and drafting Anthony Edwards. So they got that right. They made the gamble for trading for Rudy Gobert when a lot of people didn't like what they did, but it's worked out, and so you got that going on. They drafted Jaden McDaniels in, I think, the late 1st round in 2020. That pick's looking like a great pick. They get Mike Conley in a trade. They traded D'Angelo Russell to get Mike Conley. That's worked out well. And obviously they traded Karl-Anthony Towns, and they got Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. And so, and they signed Nickeil Alexander-Walker in free agency, right? And so, again, both of these general managers and organizations have done a very, very nice job of constructing their teams. And you just look at this trade again, like I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to think. Is there a more win-win trade? Is there a trade that you look back on and say both teams did awesome? Both teams got an A+. Both teams are very happy with the return and investment that they got on the players that they traded for. Is there a bigger A+ win-win trade more than this Karl-Anthony Towns, Julius Randle deal that the Minnesota Timberwolves and New York Knicks did? Is there a better, bigger A+ win-win trade compared to these 2 teams and these 2 players? I don't think so. Like I've been trying to go back and think, and it's really hard for me to think of a trade that I can look back on and say, man, both teams did incredibly well. Like, both teams did equally well and got A+ peak value on their investment. It's hard. It's really hard to think of one. You might have to go back to like the 90s or early 2000s for me to think of one. And I don't know if I can think of one, because that's how great of a deal the Minnesota Timberwolves and New York Knicks did with this Karl-Anthony Towns, Julius Randle trade. I mean, it's a great trade. Great trade for both teams. Both teams are in the conference finals. As of this moment, the New York Knicks are in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Minnesota Timberwolves are in the Western Conference Finals. Both teams have a chance to play each other in the NBA Finals. Now, imagine how hyped that would be. I mean, could you imagine the New York Knicks playing the Minnesota Timberwolves in the NBA Finals? With Karl-Anthony Towns and the Knicks playing Julius Randle, the Minnesota Timberwolves? I mean, how insane would that be? But I gotta say, man, it's a legit possibility that the Minnesota Timberwolves and New York Knicks could play each other in the conference finals. And I guess by then, maybe that will determine who really won the Karl-Anthony Towns Julius Randle trade. Whoever the winner of the NBA championship, the winner of the NBA finals is the winner of that trade. I mean, we could be seeing something like that, but hey, man, like I said, that trade's looking like a win-win. And quite frankly, just looking at the transactions that has happened over the years in the NBA, I mean, I don't know, man, but this Karl-Anthony Towns, Julius Randle trade that the Minnesota Timberwolves and the New York Knicks did, I don't know, man. It's looking like the biggest win-win trade in NBA history. That's just me.